Google just shipped Android 17 with something that changes how you multitask on your phone, and it's so seamlessly integrated you might miss how powerful it really is. This isn't just a new Android version with fresh wallpapers and a few tweaks hidden in settings. This is Google fundamentally rethinking what you can actually do at the same time on your device. The update brings deeply embedded Gemini features into the core multitasking experience, which means your AI assistant isn't just a separate chat app you tap to open anymore. Instead, it's woven directly into how Android works. Here's what shocked the industry. Google combined 3 separate systems, split-screen multitasking, floating windows, and Gemini integration, into one coherent flow that actually feels natural instead of clunky. That's the real difference between just adding a feature and completely redesigning an ecosystem. The numbers back this up too. Early testing shows users are spending 30 to 40% more time managing multiple apps at once, which sounds straightforward until you realize that's exactly what Apple's been pushing with iOS. But Google went a different direction entirely. They didn't copy Apple's playbook. Instead, they doubled down on what Android's always been best at, letting you truly control your multitasking experience. And here's where it gets interesting. Gemini can now see across all your open apps simultaneously and help you work between them. Before Android 17, multitasking on phones was honestly pretty rough. You could split your screen in two. Sure, most Android phones had that for years. But if you wanted to do 3 things at once, you were jumping between apps constantly, losing your train of thought, getting frustrated. Meanwhile, Apple's iPad Pro users were showing off smooth multitasking with multiple windows, smooth gestures, and integration that just worked. It made Android look clunky. Google saw this gap widening, and honestly, it was a problem. Here's the business side. People were spending more time on mobile devices than they ever had before, but mobile multitasking was lagging behind what people could do on laptops and tablets. That's a competitive problem, because if users feel like they can't be productive on Android without constantly fumbling between apps, they drift toward iPhones or iPads where the experience is more polished. Unlock was Gemini. Google realized they didn't need to just copy Apple's approach. They could use their AI assistant as the central nervous system, the thing that makes multitasking feel effortless instead of manual. Gemini could watch what you're doing, understand the context across multiple windows, and help bridge the gaps between apps. That's something Apple couldn't match with static features alone, because it required AI that understands what you're actually trying to accomplish. And that's exactly what Google's best at now. This wasn't just a feature request, it was a strategic repositioning. Let's break down exactly what changed under the hood. The old multitasking system was basically 2 separate worlds. You had split screen, which showed 2 apps side by side, and then floating windows, which appeared on top of whatever you were doing. These never really talked to each other. They didn't know each other existed. You had to manually manage the layout, manually switch focus, manually copy information from one window to another. It was like conducting an orchestra where none of the musicians were listening to each other. Android 17 changed that fundamentally. Now, the 3 systems, split screen, floating windows, and Gemini, are all talking to each other constantly. When you open split screen with, say, a banking app on the left and a budgeting app on the right, Gemini doesn't just see 2 separate apps. It understands you're comparing financial information. It sees that pattern. So when you need to transfer a number from one screen to the other, Gemini can offer to do it for you or suggest a calculation that connects the data. When floating windows are involved, same thing. Gemini sees the context across all the windows you've got open and can help coordinate between them. The technical part. Each app now sends context data to Gemini's service, not your private data, just information about what the app is displaying. Gemini synthesizes that across windows and suggests actions that make sense given the full context. It's like having a super smart assistant who's watching your whole screen and helping you connect the dots. Here are the scenarios where this actually transforms your day. Imagine you're planning a road trip. You've got maps open showing your route in one window, a hotel booking app in another window, and your calendar floating on top. In the old system, you'd flip between them constantly, check the distance, switch to hotels, check your calendar, switch back. Android 17 with Gemini watches this and offers to automatically flag time-sensitive bookings that conflict with your schedule, or suggest hotels along your route before you even ask. Or imagine you're researching a purchase. You're comparing laptop specs on a retailer's website, split screen, while reading reviews on a tech forum. Gemini sees both windows and pulls the key specs into a comparison table that auto-updates as you scroll. You're literally not copying and pasting anything. It's doing that invisible coordination for you. Another real example, you're writing an email while composing a complex document. Gemini watches both windows, sees there's information in the document that belongs in the email, and offers to summarize and insert it. These aren't just nice-to-haves. These are the moments where Android suddenly feels like it's working with you instead of making you do all the work. That's why people are spending 30 to 40% more time multitasking on Android 17, because it's finally smooth enough that multitasking becomes the natural way to work, not a clunky workaround you avoid. So how does Android 17 actually compare to what Apple's been doing with iOS and iPad OS? Here's the honest take. Apple perfected static multitasking years ago. Their iPad split screen is smooth, their floating windows work beautifully, and the gestures are intuitive. But it's basically a well-designed layout system. You move windows around, you manage the view. It's like rearranging furniture in a very smart way. Android 17 does something completely different. It layers intelligent assistance on top of the multitasking engine. It's not just better, it's a fundamentally different approach. Apple would never embed ChatGPT into iOS multitasking the way Google embedded Gemini. That's not Apple's design philosophy. Apple believes in simplicity and user control. You tell your phone what to do, and it does it cleanly. Google believes in intelligence and assistance. Your phone watches what you're doing and offers to help before you ask. On paper, that sounds like it should favor Google, and early tests suggest it does. Users spend longer multitasking on Android, which means they're getting value from the Gemini assistance. But here's where iOS has an advantage: stability. Apple's a locked system. Everything's optimized for everything else. Google's building on Android's wild openness, which is powerful, but also means there's more complexity, more potential for weird interactions. By the end of 2026, we'll have real numbers, which systems users are actually more productive. That's when the real competition starts. Android 17 matters way beyond just getting multitasking done faster. This is a major change in how AI integrates into the OS itself. Until now, AI assistants like Gemini were tools you opened, like the calculator app or maps. You launched them when you needed them. Android 17 makes Gemini ambient. It's always watching, always understanding context, always ready to help. That has huge implications. First, productivity. The 30 to 40% bump in multitasking time probably understates the real benefit. If Gemini helps you work across 3 apps seamlessly instead of fumbling between them, you're not just working faster, you're thinking better. You're not losing context constantly. That compounds over hours and days. Second, data. Gemini watching what you're doing across apps means Google knows more about how you work and what interests you. That's personalization power. But it's also a privacy conversation every Android user needs to have with themselves. Third, the ecosystem changes. Developers will start optimizing for Gemini integration. They'll build assuming their app is one of several windows Gemini might be coordinating between. That's a completely different design paradigm than what they are used to. Finally, the market. Apple just lost a major area where they had a clear advantage. Google can now claim the multitasking throne, not because their layout looks pretty, but because it's smarter. That's a new battleground for phone sales in 2026. So you've got Android 17. How do you actually access these features? Split screen works like before. Pull up the app switcher, hold and drag an app to split screen, select a second app. What's new is Gemini automatically activates. You'll see a Gemini badge appear with suggestions. When Gemini offers to move data or summarize differences, you just tap it. For floating windows, long press the app switcher button and select float. Gemini watches and offers context-aware suggestions. To manually ask for help, summon Gemini and say things like "help me compare these" or "pull this information into both windows." Gemini understands the context of what's actually open. The settings are in display multitasking, where you can adjust Gemini's suggestion frequency, more suggestions, fewer, or off for manual control. One tip: Gemini works best when both apps share data. Most major apps support this now. Check their settings if something isn't working smoothly. The feature's designed to be invisible when it's working right. You shouldn't have to think about coordination. You should just see it happen. It's honestly one of those features that feels like magic the first time you use it, but within a week, it becomes so natural you'll forget multitasking any other way. If you want even more power, there's an advanced mode in settings where you can customize exactly which apps Gemini pays attention to and which stay isolated. For most people, the default setup works great right out of the box. Here's what this all comes down to. Android 17 isn't just another OS update with a version bump and some polish. This is Google fundamentally changing how phones handle productivity and AI assistance. They took 3 separate systems, split screen, floating windows, and Gemini, and wove them into one intelligent, context-aware experience. The result is that Android users can now do more things at once, faster and smoother than ever before. And that matters because phones aren't just entertainment devices anymore. They are how most people actually work. If you're on Android, this update is worth installing day one. If you're on iOS, this is the moment to think about whether the iPhone's simplicity still outweighs Android's new smarts. For Google, this is a major step toward their vision of an OS that doesn't just execute commands, but understands what you're trying to accomplish and helps you get there. Watch how developers respond over the next few months. The ones who build Gemini integration into their apps will pull ahead. They'll offer the seamless experience users now expect. Those who don't will feel clunky by comparison. This is the new baseline for Android, and it raises the bar for everyone. Subscribe to watch how this technology evolves, because this is just the beginning of AI becoming truly ambient in our devices. What you're using right now is going to look primitive in 6 months. Follow for daily AI news.